30 times faster. That's the figure the old accounts hand down for the wind-powered sawmill set against two men and a handsaw. A pair of sawyers needed 4 months to cut a load of logs into planks. The mill did it in about a week. On paper, that's an unbeatable business. So let's make it yours. Say you own one of these mills, the sails, the saw frames, the 5 men on the floor. This video is about what owning it costs you, counted in guilders, because the machine that cut 30 times faster could lose you money faster than almost anything you could own. Which is it, a fortune or a trap? We'll run your mill through 3 years to find out. A good one, an ordinary one, and a bad one. And the bad one loses money. So what do you actually own? 5 men, a wooden mill, and one problem you can't fix. Start with the 5 men. The historian Stilgar studied these mills closely. He puts the crew of a paltrock sawmill at 5. A paltrock is just the name for this type of mill. From here on, I'll call it your mill. You pay those 5 whether the mill runs or not. By the wage records of the time, an Amsterdam laborer earned around 300 guilders a year. 5 of them is roughly 1,500 guilders in wages every year, before you've sold a single plank. Now the problem you can't fix. Your mill runs on wind. On a calm day, the sails don't turn. The saws don't move. Nothing gets cut. But those 5 wages still come due. That's the trap in one line. Your costs stay fixed from month to month. What you actually produce does not. It rises and falls with the wind, and the wind answers to no one. Next, the mill itself. What did one cost to own? The cleanest price we have is a late one. In 1806, a paltrock sawmill was bought in Zaan for 4,000 guilders, taken apart, and shipped off as a kit. That's 2 centuries after the machine was invented, so treat it as a guide, not gospel. But it tells us the order of size. A mill was a few thousand guilders, real money, but not a fortune. And a mill lasted. One of these paltrock sawmills, built in 1776, was still cutting wood into the 1920s. That's well over a century of work. Think about what that means for you. Spread 4,000 guilders across 100 years and more, and the mill barely costs you anything per year. Your grandchildren could still be sawing on it. So the building is not what ruins you. What ruins you is everything you pay to keep it working. To keep it running, you pay upkeep. In 1630, a group of Amsterdam timber merchants hired millwrights to build and maintain their mills for 500 guilders a year. Call that your upkeep, too. So before any wood, your fixed costs are 2 things: 1,500 guilders in wages and 500 in upkeep. That is 2,000 guilders a year that you owe no matter what the wind does. 2,000 guilders. Hold that number. It's the whole story. That number is the kind of thing this channel exists to dig out. The real cost, hidden under a story everyone already knows. If that's what you're here for, subscribe and let's get back to your mill and the wood. Then the wood. You don't grow it. Holland has almost no forest. Your logs come by sea. Until the 1650s, most of them came from Norway. The historians De Vries and van der Voorde call Norway the largest timber supplier to the Dutch by far in those years. There was a saying at the time. Amsterdam stands on Norway. The city itself was built on timber piles shipped down from the north, driven deep into the soft Dutch ground. And the trade was enormous. In the 1640s, several hundred Dutch ships were working the Norway run alone. One northern port logged more than 6,000 loads of timber in a single year in the 1680s. So the wood was there, rivers of it. The question was always the price, and whether you could get the right kind, and your supply didn't stay put. As the nearest Norwegian forests thinned, more of the timber came from further off, from the Baltic. For you, that meant longer voyages, more hands taking a cut, and a price you controlled even less than before. Because there's a catch, and it lands on you as the owner. Your mill only wins on big timber. Running 5 men is expensive. In Norway, a simple water-powered sawmill needed only 2. So, on small, cheap logs, the Norwegians undercut you. Your mill only paid off on the large logs where the speed did the work. And you're not the only one chasing them. Remember, this machine was supposed to belong to one man. In 1593, the states of Holland granted a patent for the wind powered sawmill to Cornelis Corneliszoon. In his own words, he was a poor farmer with a wife and children. His idea was one clever part: a crankshaft turning the round sweep of the sails into the straight up and down stroke of a saw. Wind turned into cutting. Simple, and once people had seen it, it could not be unseen. The patent gave him the sole right to the machine, a monopoly in writing. It didn't hold. Within a few years, there were dozens of these mills, then hundreds, and nobody could keep the idea to themselves. And there was a reason they all gathered in the same place. In the port cities, the hand sawyers had guilds, and the guilds fought the machine that threatened their living. In Amsterdam, they kept the mills out until 1630, but the Zaan was open countryside. No guilds, no ban, just wind and water and room to build. So the mills came to the Zaan by the dozen and then by the hundred. By one count, more than 200 sawmills would eventually crowd along that one small river. So as an owner, you don't own something rare. You own one mill among hundreds, all cutting the same planks, chasing the same buyers, fighting for the same big logs. The machine is a marvel. The margins are thin, and the wood can disappear on you. A government somewhere closes a border, and your supply is simply gone. In 1628, the Danish king allowed oak exports to Holland. In 1640, he banned them again. When a supply like that shuts, the large timber your mill lives on turns scarce and expensive almost overnight, and your fixed costs do not care. You still owe your 2,000 guilders. Before we run the numbers, one honest word about the money. You can't turn a 17th century guilder into today's euros in any reliable way. Too much has changed, and anyone who hands you a clean exchange rate is guessing. So, we won't. We'll price everything against the world your mill lived in. A laborer's whole year was about 300 guilders. A live-in maid in Amsterdam earned around 120. And a full seagoing ship? Around 1690, the shipbuilding manual of Nicolaes Witsen put a big one at 100,000 guilders. Hold those in your head. Your fixed costs come to 2,000 guilders every year. A laborer's year is 300. A great ship is 100,000. And the planks your mill cuts are exactly what those ships are made of. And in the 17th century, the shipyards were almost always busy. Cheap machine-sawn wood changed Dutch shipbuilding. The Zaan yards could build faster and cheaper than the old yards in the cities. And within about 20 years, they had taken most of the business. The Dutch turned out those plain cargo ships by the hundred, and everyone was a stack of your planks with a hull around it. So in a normal year, you are not chasing buyers. The shipyards need what you make. That steady demand is what makes a good year feel safe. It's also what makes a bad year such a shock. When your mill can't run, the buyers are still there, and you have nothing to sell them. Now the ledger, 3 years in the life of your mill, same 5 men, and same 2,000 guilders of fixed cost each time. What changes is the wind and the wood. Year 1, the good year. The wind is steady. Your sails turn on most working days. The big Norwegian logs arrive cheap, and the Amsterdam shipyards are buying every plank you can cut. On a good run, your mill saws 30 times faster than any hand sawyer. So you clear your 2,000 in fixed costs early in the year, and most of what comes after is profit. And the demand was real. Every ship on the stocks swallowed a small forest of planks, and a big ship, remember, was worth 100,000 guilders. In a good year, the yards could not get enough. This is the year that makes owning a mill look like genius. But look at what the good year needed: steady wind, cheap big logs, and ready buyers, all 3 at once. Year 2. The ordinary year, the wind is average, some weeks the sails fly, some weeks they barely move. Timber costs a little more this year. Buyers are steady, not desperate. You still cover your 2,000. You still come out ahead. But the surplus is thin, and you spend the year watching the sky and the timber price. This is what most years actually looked like: a steady, unremarkable living for an owner who watched his costs. Year 3, the bad year. Two things go wrong at once, and they're the two things you don't control. First, the wind fails, a long, calm stretch, and for weeks the sails hardly turn. Second, the wood is cut off. Say it's a year like 1640, when the Danish oak ban shuts a major supply. The large timber your mill lives on turns scarce and dear. Some of it you've already paid to ship in, and now it just sits in the yard. And the damage is simple. The mill barely runs. So almost nothing gets cut, and almost nothing gets sold. But the 5 wages still come due. The upkeep still comes due. That's 2,000 guilders gone in a year. The mill earned you next to nothing. And it's worse than a blank year. You're out the 2,000 in wages and upkeep. You're also out the money you sank into timber you couldn't cut. Add it all up. The bad year does not just leave you flat. You end it poorer than you began, down on the order of 2,000 guilders and more. Paid out to keep 5 men and a mill alive through a year that gave you almost nothing back. That's the whole shape of owning one. In a good year, the speed makes you look untouchable. In a bad year, the same fixed costs bury you. And the two things that decide which year you get, the wind and the wood, are both out of your hands. So think about the man who started all of this, Cornelis Corneliszoon, the poor farmer with the patent. He had the one thing no owner on the Zaan ever got, a monopoly on paper from the states of Holland, the sole legal right to the machine. It didn't save him. The patent didn't hold. The invention was bought up, copied, and carried down the river, and the men who grew rich were the ones who owned the mills and the timber, not the man who drew the first crankshaft. He never turned his own invention into wealth. He died around 1607, and after his death, his widow was still petitioning the authorities. So the reversal, and it's the honest end of the story. The Windsor Mill was one of the great money-making machines of its age. It helped build the richest trading region in Europe. In a good year, it made owners look like geniuses. But owning one was never a license to print money. It was a bet on the wind and the wood, placed again every single year. And the one man who truly owned the idea, the farmer who dreamed it up, made almost nothing from it at all.